My favorite conservative is Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist and a senior fellow at the think tank, the Heartland Institute. All right, Ben, so can we agree that the Cantor tweet characterization of this is just not true, right? That is not the problem here.
The problem here is about labor force participation. It's not about some new aspect of Obamacare that's been discovered that's killing jobs. This is CBO is basically going back and looking at the prediction that they gave us a few years ago when they said that about 800,000 equivalent full-time would drop out of the labor force because of Obamacare. This is them looking at it again after new research that's been done by Harvard, by MIT scholars, by the University of Chicago in particular, that essentially found that the effect was going to be far more dramatic. In part, this is because of the effect of subsidies on the marketplace, but it's really driven by the fact that Obamacare is behaving differently than Romneycare in a couple of key ways, which was the basis for the earlier CBO assumption.
So that is a really good point, and I think actually this is where we get to where there is, I think, a genuine point of contention, right? Mm-hmm. Let's separate out two kinds of ways that people might choose to work less because of Obamacare, right?
Sure.
One, which a lot of people are talking about, is this early retirement, which you see a lot. I mean, I've heard a lot of people saying, I am working until I'm on Medicaid. Like that is, I'm sorry, I am working until I'm on Medicare, right? That is a very common thing you hear, and there's a certain amount of people that the presence of Obamacare means, oh, I have guaranteed issue, I'm 60, 61, I can leave my job and I can have health care. I don't have to stay locked in this job for health care. That to me seems like a net benefit, right? Do you agree with that?
You know, yes and no. I think it's a net benefit for the people who are there, who are in that position. But in terms of what it could do to the cost of the subsidies, it could actually increase them because you've got older people who are likelier to be sicker. So that may actually increase the cost of those subsidies. So it's a slight benefit for those people, but it also could, you know, hurt the bottom line.
Now the other thing, right, is that the way, and this is an undeniable fact, this is not like some made-up right-wing attack. The way that the subsidies work in Obamacare is at the margins there's going to be some trade-off that someone's going to have, which is, do I go into the workforce and earn more income and reduce my subsidy, or do I stay out of the workforce, earn less income, and keep my subsidy? And there's going to be some pool of people for which that's kind of a heads or tails flip, and that seems to me the kind of legitimate policy concern and critique for conservatives to make.
It is, and I think it's true. Here's the thing to remember. It's true of all means-tested programs.
That is the key point.
But you have a situation where right now you've got a lot of families out there where you may have one full-time employee, and that's not enough in terms of the bottom line. For a family that's making, a family of four making about $35,000 a year, the real effect that this has is that it makes it a lot less likely, a lot less tempting for that person to work a full-time job. It makes it more tempting to work in a part-time capacity or to maybe not take a part-time job for the spouse's side. And that's going to have an effect on the broader economy in terms of their future earning power.
Right. Now, the other question on this is, how much do we want people to work? Check this out. This is average hours worked, okay? It's not like Americans are layabouts in any way, okay? We work a lot more than a lot of other people. And so the question is, like, is the good here, the weird subtext of this whole thing, once people actually understand what the CBO report was saying, seemed to be this kind of idea that, like, man, we need Americans working more hours. I just don't see that as a political good.
Well, I think that the real question, Chris, for you is how many jobs are too many jobs? How few jobs are too few jobs? It's one of these situations where I think, in terms of the evaluation that the American people are going to make for themselves, my own perspective is I'd rather have that family working more hours because it's going to increase their income over the course of time. It's going to lead to better outcomes for their family. The perspective on the other side is, well, they're working fewer hours, but they're going to have health insurance. They're going to have Obamacare there for them. And I think that that's really a question of what kind of economy you want. Do you want one where people are working more hours for themselves and their families, or do you want one where some people are going to be working more hours to pay for the subsidies, and some people are going to be working fewer hours, but they'll have health care?
I want an honest. I like this was very productive, and I think an honest kind of slogan for conservative Republicans is, "We want you to work more hours." Ben Domenech from the Heartland Institute. Thanks so much for your time today.
Work harder, you lay about.
All right. Joining me now, Eric Boehlert, senior fellow at Media Matters. Okay, this was so classic.
Yeah.
Every time, conservatives kick the shiny ball on Obamacare.
Right.
everyone goes and chases it, and then they get it, and they're like, oh, this is not it. This is not the thing that we've been reporting to people.
So then they sort of change the topic. Right. Sometimes we talk about phony scandals, Benghazi, IRS, how they manufacture these subcultures. This is sort of old school. This is like textbook misinformation. So you take a kernel of truth or something that sounds like a kernel of truth. Obamacare is going to kill 2 million jobs. The Republican Party starts churning it, simultaneously hitting all cylinders, Fox, Rush Limbaugh, right-wing media. They start pushing this. And then the question is, what does the mainstream media do? That's literally why Media Matters was invented.
Right, exactly.
To put up this firewall and just say,
so why aren't you doing your jobs?
Yes.
Why? So I should blame you. The fact is, basically what you're saying is you failed.
We failed.
Because this happened. Although let me say this on the upside, and I was saying to you off camera before the show started. The cycle of this was much more truncated than the cycle of the canceled plans hysteria, which lasted 2 weeks before anyone started actually like doing the follow-up reporting to show that a lot of those stories were not at all what they looked like in the beginning.
And the key here is, in this cycle, in the mainstream media, some important players stepped up. Last night on the network news, most of them were very good and very careful. But that didn't cover everyone. And so a lot of people went forward with the misinformation. And then they said, and then this weird analysis late in the day yesterday and this morning was, well, okay, the Republicans are lying, but it doesn't look good for Democrats. They're going to be able to get attack ads out of it.
Yeah, let me read this from Politico, because this was typical. It says, but what matters politically? It said, oh, yes, you're right about the numbers, but what matters politically is how the numbers look in attack ads. And in this election year, 2 million lost jobs is a Republican ad maker's dream. Now, all of my liberal comrades are pillaring that and have been beating up on Chris Cillizza at the Washington Post. And I actually think, and Chris Cillizza, I thought, wrote a decent defense, which is that actually I do think there is a place to distinguish between the substantive first-order analysis of what the policy is and how it will play politically. I don't think we're right. I mean, that seems defensible to me. The problem to me is when people who are tasked with the first job, which is mastering the policy, knowing the difference between the supply of labor and the demand for labor, get it wrong.
So the first report should be, what is in the CBO report? What do economists say? What do healthcare experts say? What is the meaning of this? Maybe down in the second half, or the second lead story is, this is how it plays politically. The press went right to the politics, right to the horse race. Who's up, who's down, who's going to make an attack ad? That's really not covering healthcare policy. And I think, frankly, we see a press that cannot stop covering campaigns or get out of campaign mode. You can't cover public policy.
The first thought was from the CBO report was not what are these budget projections, what does it mean about whether the policy is working or not, or as Ben, I think, ably pointed out, what assumptions about it. There was stuff in that report for conservatives or people skeptical of Obamacare to genuinely and legitimately wave in their favor. It wasn't like the report said everything about Obamacare is perfect. It's just that there was not, it seemed to me, the capacity and facility in the initial reports to actually get their arms around it.
Everything is about who's up, who's down. Everything is, this is bad news for Obama. Look, this has been 5 years. I understand you have a minority party that's constantly going to be lobbying in the White House, but that doesn't mean that's the news cycle. Republicans attack the White House on fill in the blank. That doesn't have to be the news every day on everything. This is an important report. It's an important topic. The press should be able to figure out demand and supply and things like that and explain why it matters.
My favorite quote.
And then get to the politics.
I saw that Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Democrat, had described the CBO report today as Obama's Waterloo, which is funny because someone else described Obamacare as Obama's Waterloo. That guy's no longer in Congress anymore. He's running a right-wing think tank. So that the history of predictions of the demise of Obamacare and the political demise of the Democrats and Barack Obama because of Obamacare has shown to be reliably and sequentially overstated.
Yeah, and I think the press has sort of bought into this after years and years and years.
They keep expecting it.
And people are saying, this is the killer, this is the killer. They keep waiting for that knockout punch because they've been programmed, I think.
Eric Buller from Media Matters, thanks so much for your time. Coming up, all right, why did the Chris Christie administration quietly fire the company it had hired to manage millions of dollars in federal Sandy funds? We have new reporting on the story we first brought you last night. You're not going to see it anywhere else on TV. Stick around.